Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of my podcast. Today's podcast will be on the mind versus the brain. And as usual, I'm going to start this podcast off with a quote. I think, therefore I am. Rene Descartes. That's a very short quote, but it's a very powerful quote. Um, and I think it sums up the conversation that we're about to have today on the mind versus the brain. Now, the reason that I came up with this podcast was kind of been, I've been thinking about it from the previous week is because, when I say mind versus brain, a lot of people think that they're one and the same thing. And in doing my research, like I found out that a lot of scientists and psychologists have very different opinions on the mind versus the brain, and some like fields or in some talks, like scientists don't even like to acknowledge the fact that the mind exists. um a lot of scientists feel that the mind doesn't exist, and for I don't want to go into like the scientific jumbo, or the scientific mumbo jumbo that is specific to the way that they describe like how the neurons and stuff like that and electrical signals transfer through the brain, and those electrical signals interact with this and that. It really goes in depth about how these things happen. Like scientists have really mapped out um the human body, and by and large there are some things that are still a mystery to scientists. They haven't figured out everything, but they have figured out a lot about the human body, a lot about the mind and the processes and the way it interacts with the body, and the way thoughts and feelings um, influence the brain to do certain things or to cause the body to do some certain things. Um, the brain is an organ, but the mind isn't. The brain is the physical place where the mind resides. The mind is the manifestation of thoughts, perceptions, emotions, determinations, memory, and imagination. This all takes place within the brain. The mind is often used to refer especially to the thought process of reason. So, like this is also like in a comparison in a roundabout way to subconscious versus conscious, but it's very different because the brain is actually a physical place. Like you can actually touch your brain, not through your skull, but you can actually physically hold or touch your brain. Your mind, however, you can't, which is similar to the subconscious or conscious. um, and this is one of the reasons why it's so heavily debated, is because scientists believe in things that are you can touch, you can see, and thus you can explain it. For instance, when a scientist tries to explain like a thought, for instance, um they'll say in short that if you're trying to have a thought or experience an emotion, it's because your brain has done something, specifically sent an electrical signal crackled along a whole bunch of neurons, and those neurons handed off droplets of neurochemicals like runners handing off a baton in a relay race. That was just an example that I found on the website while doing research. I was on some other websites that went way more in depth about how you know an emotion elicits a response, and that response causes you to react a certain way. And I mean, it goes super in depth, and really in depth, and it's if it's not the type of thing that you're into or that you really want to give yourself to understand, it can be a little bit confusing. But basically the short of it is that when something happens to you or experiences something, your body elicits a response to that. Meaning, like how we've discussed fight or flight, which is basically a chemical reaction or an instinctual reaction that your body has developed over time in order to project your life or sustain your ability to survive a situation. This is something that has been developed in us over time, and it's something that we can train, but by and large we don't train it. So like the fight or flight response, um it, again, is driven by perspective, and that perspective is training. So like one of the things that I was reading is, just in some research that I've done in the past, is that your body will dump chemicals or elicit a response, send an electrical signal to different parts of your brain. And that stimulus that it elicits, or that it sends out, or the chemical reaction that it starts, it's just that, it's a stimulus. So by and large, is our perspective drives how we feel in response to that chemical dump. So like fear and being excited or being happy is both the same feeling. You know what I'm saying? Like how you get, like if you ride on a roller coaster and stuff like that, you might be scared or you might be excited. It's a fine line between the two for me. But your body just elicits a chemical response, and then your perspective of the situation is what dictates how you feel in reference to that. And that perspective is held in your mind. So if you feel that you're in danger, you know, it will elicit a certain response. Now, if you train like people in the Marines or in the police department or in the fire department or in the EMS, people who have to daily put themselves in harm's way or have to daily deal with other people who may be in a certain predicament where they have to react and they can't afford to just pause or hesitate, you will feel that same response. But instead of having this response, which is like an untrained response, you'll have this response, which is a trained response. So you might feel those emotions and they might stir up in the back of your mind, but instead of them being in the front of your mind, they're in the back of your mind, and your response to that same stimuli will be a lot different. I'm not saying that happens for everybody, but it's definitely something that is a condition or a response in reference to training. And the reason I said all of that is because there's a phenomenon known as neuroplasticity. And this refers to the ability of the brain to change its structure and function in response to outside stimuli as well as internal activity. So what this talks about basically is how we have discussed in previous settings, discipline and the importance of having habits and goal setting, and those little things that we discussed that we need to do day in and day out in order to build a pattern to change our behavior. Neuroplasticity is the science behind all of that. So basically, in doing little things, little daily things, forming habits and forming new ways of thinking and new actions that we take, and efforts to create a new us. Neuroplasticity is the phenomenon that's responsible for all of that taking place. Like I've read in just in my past research that I've done just by myself, that it takes 30 days to develop a habit. So in that 30 days, your mind is changing and getting used to the new you and the new decisions that you're making. Like Rob Dial, he talks about, in the morning time, he always takes a cold shower. And the reason why he takes a cold shower is not because he likes cold showers, but because he is forcing his body to do things that it doesn't want to do. So once he's already set that condition in his mind, anything else that he has to do that he doesn't want to do throughout the day will come easy, because he has already put his mind in that place that if we come to a crossroad where I have two choices: either do it or I don't want to do it. And I'm falling more heavily into the latter of the two categories, that I'm already going to do what I need to do because I've set in my mindset that I do what I need to do, not what I want to do. And one of the biggest ways that I can, show neuroplasticity and the mind versus the brain and stuff like that is boot camp. And the reason I always go back to boot camp is because I cannot think of anything in my life that was the single most impactful thing on the individual that I have become. Because, I mean, I had my childhood and stuff like that, and that was very formative, very impactful. Um, then I went to my high school, started my sophomore year. That changed the way I thought, the way I acted and stuff in a very big way. Then I went to college, and that kind of set me up for boot camp as far as like my train of thought and the way I carried myself and stuff like that. But I feel like everything that I went through in life was an effort to train me for boot camp. Like I feel like boot camp was type of it was the pinnacle of everything that I had gone through in my life. And when I made it to boot camp, even though it was 13 weeks, it was 13 weeks of an experience that is very unique to Paris Island and the Marine Corps. Not saying that the other branches don't have that same experience or that same effect on their recruits, but me going through Marine Corps boot camp only, um, it was a very life changing experience. And the reason it was so life changing is because for 13 weeks, you do the same thing or similar things day in and day out, and things are expected of you, like how you carry yourself, how you talk, how you perform. You know, you're doing all of this stuff working towards a goal. And I believe it's impossible for you to go through Marine Corps boot camp and not be changed. Like I don't feel that anybody can go from day one to day 13 and be the same individual um, throughout that process. Because neuroplasticity is basically a survival mechanism. Because if you don't, how can I say it without seeming crazy, but if you don't like adhere to their way of life, at least for boot camp sake, it's not going to turn out good for you. Um, because it really is a way of life. And the way neuroplasticity helps is that when you first get there, I mean, it's chaos, it's crazy. You don't know left from right, you don't know up from down. Like, you're still learning stuff, but once you get out of that first phase, like you kind of have the basics down pat, and now you're starting to get into some of your more advanced trainings, and more is expected of you, but you also understand more. You're not just on Paris Island like a deer in headlights. Like you kind of got a feeling of what's going on. By and large, you're taken everywhere under supervision, and if you just listen to what you're told and do what you're instructed to do, then you shouldn't have an issue. But just learning how to maneuver and stuff like that is, very, I don't know, impactful on the individuals that go through the process. Because I mean, it's just like nothing I've ever been through. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's a very good thing, because I don't know where I would be in my life if it wasn't for the experiences that I had leading up to boot camp, and then boot camp as a result of those experiences. But when I look back, through everything that I went through, and I break it down in reference to my podcast and the stuff that we talk about, I definitely see the mind versus the brain. Because one instance that I could think of, excuse me, my voice is cracking. Just woke up not too long ago. But one instance that I can think of within Paris Island or boot camp that was very impactful to me was anything we had to do with heights. So I had, as I've discussed in the past, I had got my pilot's license while I was in high school. But all throughout probably the second half of my senior year, I basically flew a whole lot less than I did the previous 3 years. And all throughout college, I didn't fly at all. So my whole, like, my vibe, or, my flow or my comfort with flying and heights had kind of diminished. And I went back to how I was before I flew, which is, heights kind of unsettled me. And when I went to boot camp, they have a confidence course and they have the rappel tower. And the confidence course has a few obstacles that are high in nature. The A-frame, the slide for life, and then they have a few others. And then the rappel tower, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the rappel tower. Um, they were both instances where I felt fear, but I was more scared of what would happen if I didn't fight through that fear. Because at Paris Island, they have a great way of exposing you. And if you show fear or show that you're scared, they're gonna make you keep doing that until you can act without hesitation. So when I was doing the confidence course, even though I was scared, I was more scared of the repercussions than I was of what my brain was saying. So in my mind, I shifted the perspective. I focused on what I wanted more. And even though my mind was like in fight or flight response, or it was telling me like, hey, you haven't done this in the past, heights make you uncomfortable. In my mind, I was saying, you got to push through this. You got to fight through it. You got to get it done. It's a part of graduation. You set the precedence that in the beginning that you were going to make it through boot camp your first time around with no issues. This is a part of doing that. And I made up in my mind that this roadblock that had existed in the past would no longer exist in the present, because the goal that I wanted was bigger than this obstacle was. And that just blew up in my mind. Like, I was like, this is crazy. Like, we have all this power, in ourselves. Like, everything we need to be successful is really in ourselves. If we have the ability to just in a moment, think that something that used to plague us, that used to be an issue, no longer matters, and you can just defeat that wall, or that hurdle, just by repetition and day in and day out doing the same thing over and over again, that we can get to our goals and our destinations. It was just awesome to discover that. And that was the one of the things that really changed me and made me more confident in who I am. And even in high school when I was flying, at first, and I know I've told this story before, at first when I started flying, I was horrified. Everything, taking off, level. I wasn't comfortable until the airplane was level, flying in a straight line. Like, if it was turning, I was a little bit nervous. If we were descending, I was a little bit nervous. If we were climbing, I was a little bit nervous. I was a little bit nervous just at every little inkling that the plane made. But as time went on, I got more comfortable, and it got to a point where hopping in a plane and flying from here to from Virginia to Maryland, or any one of the various airports that I landed at, it almost became as routine as hopping in a car and going to a destination. That's how comfortable I got. And again, that was an early lesson in me, in the mind versus the brain, and me taking my mind, despite the fear that the brain was naturally, the response to the fear that the brain was naturally, sending out signals and chemicals to, and me using my mind to override that fear, or override that instinctual, setting, in order to achieve my goals and my desires. And that's kind of been like one of the most powerful lessons, or the most formative things that have happened to me in my life. And just examples of it have been like high school, the Marine Corps, and then there's other things that I've felt that as well. But the kicker to that is that once you once you find out this information, or once you unlock this key, or once you have this experience, now you have no excuse because you've already been through it. So you understand, that I have this power. So now you have almost the responsibility or duty to enact this power, instead of being like, I don't know where to go from here, or I don't know what to do, or I don't know how to get around this hurdle. The answer is simple, and David Goggins talks about it, Jocko Willink, Rob Dial. I mean, any motivational speaker that you want to listen to, Eric Thomas, even me, I'll say it over and over again. you know any way around your hurdle, or the most direct path to the goal that you want to obtain, is to go through your issues. If it's hard, do it hard. If you're scared of heights, just do it. Tackle the heights. If what you have to do to get to your goal is to get comfortable with heights, then do it. Just do it. That's it. Just do it. Like Nike says, just do it. If you're scared of swimming, swim. Like, go find a teacher, learn how to swim, get in the pool, get comfortable. That's if that's what it's gonna take to get to your goals, do it. Professional speaking, talking on stages, if that makes you uncomfortable, but that's a way to get to your goal. Go take classes or go volunteer to talk on stages or in front of people. Get knowledge on whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, because once you obtain knowledge, you obtain a certain type of confidence in what you're doing. And relax. At the end of the day, we're not all perfect. We're not all going to get it right. But the most important thing is that you try. And when you try, it's not like a half-hearted, or oh, I'm just gonna try, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You got to put your all into it. You got to put your effort. You got to be dedicated. You got to be motivated, and you have to do whatever it takes to accomplish your goal, because your dreams and your goals are bigger than yourself. And you were put on this earth for a reason, and your dreams and goals are a subtle way of showing you why you're here, or what you're here to do. And if it's big enough, or if it's important enough for you to dream about it, or for you to pursue it in another setting other than your full-time job or whatever, I mean, why not put all you can into it and do it full time? I mean, if that's what you want to do, if you're completely content with doing it on the side or something like that, then why not? But if it's something that you love, you feel passionate about, you want it to be a main source of income, why not put all that you got into it? Give it your best, put your best foot forward, and just fight through it day in and day out.